Hey guys, look who's back. Sony finally has a new device for the US market. Question is it a phone worth waiting for, or just another case of our friends from Japan being a little late to the party? Let's take a look at the Xperia Z1S, available now for T-Mobile. There are really no surprises with the Xperia Z1S from a hardware standpoint. Sony's kind of gotten into a groove with their omni-balanced design, which pretty much lets you know what to expect ahead of time. It's going to be pretty simple, it's going to be rectangular, and it's going to have only the slightest bit of, I wouldn't say flair, but things that stick out a little bit of the details. For instance, you've got the power button, which is going to stick out because it's silver, while the rest of the device is pretty much black. It has a reflective surface on top of it, so it looks pretty clean, but it picks up a lot of fingerprints. The material itself, it doesn't feel like it's retaining moisture or whatever, but your fingerprints and your handprints will constantly be something that you're wiping away on the back of the device. Let's go back to where the buttons are. You've got your power button here, volume right beneath it, and you got this little dedicated camera button. Strangely, they don't make it launch directly into the camera when you touch it. I was expecting that, but when you're in the camera app itself and you press that button, it will act as a shutter and it'll take a photo for you. At the top, you've got your headphone jack. And when you look at the side, you see that it's got these little flaps. That's because this is a waterproof phone. And as such, it has to protect itself. Strangely, there's no flap on top of the headphone jack, which is a big plus because I hate when waterproof phones have that. But other times when you need to access certain things, like, let me see if I can get it. All right, there we go. We need to get to the SIM tray. You have it right here on the right-hand side with the flap there. On the left-hand side, you have your charging port and your micro SD. The charging port is the one at the top. This can kind of get a little annoying because you kind of have to dance around where the opening is, but for the most part, it's not that annoying. It's definitely something that you can manage. And then once you make sure you have everything firm and secure, you can have this underwater. You can have this in a desert or whatever because it has, as well as waterproofing, it has dust proofing. So we've had water resistant phones. This is a waterproof phone. The difference is the amount of time it can stay unsubmerged underwater. This one has longer than we've ever seen from a Sony device in the US. Of course, we know that hardware is more than just the design. A big part of the hardware is the display. And in this case, you've got I'd say, controversial display? Not really, but it's going to be something that's going to be love or hate. For one, in terms of pixel density, it's fantastic. It's a 5-inch display, 1080p resolution. So the clarity is always going to be strong. You're never going to have like fuzzy images or anything like that. It looks very nice. The problem is, like with a lot of Sony displays, it has a lot of tuning that Sony has done because they think that's going to make it look better. But part of that aspect is that when you tilt it, when you kind of look away from it, if you're not looking directly straight on, the viewing angles are very restrictive, so it gets dark unless you're looking straight at it, and it's kind of bad. Another downside is that it looks a little bit too washed out. Like there's a bit more whiteness to this display than you typically see with smartphones, and a lot of people don't care for that. It doesn't bother me as much, but it's definitely something that you will notice for sure. So you're going to most likely end up needing to go to the display section, which allows you to customize or tweak things a little bit more. Sony's got X Reality for image enhancement in photos and videos. You can turn that on and off. They also have white balance. This is what you're most likely going to want to play with a little bit because you can kind of adjust the way that the whiteness to the display. It's not always going to be that way, but it can help depending on if you're someone who notices that the screen doesn't really match your needs. Z1S performance is very favorable. You really can't complain much about this device because it has the Qualcomm Snapdragon 2.2 GHz quad-core processor. As you can see, that puts it on par with the Galaxy Note 3, Xperia Z Ultra, the G2. Pretty much all of the phones released in the latter part of 2013 had the Qualcomm Snapdragon 800, and that was definitely a genre leader. So you pretty much see the same thing here that you saw on those other devices. Very fast, very responsive, responsive. You don't have problems with loading times. When you go from one app to another, you pretty much tap it and it comes up. It scrolls quickly. You don't really have any issues most of the time. The one issue that I did run into, I noticed on the lock screen, it's a little bit slow when you try to get into the camera. So I swipe, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4. So almost 4 seconds. That's not very fast. It's a little bit slow. But aside from that, in gaming in particular, it is very nice. It was smooth with the frame rates. I was playing some racing games. I was playing Asphalt. I was playing Riptide. And I was very impressed by how the graphics look perfect on this big screen. I didn't have any problems with long loading times on different apps. So it's very nice to have and a very pleasing sight to see. In other areas of performance, such as the battery, Sony definitely did well on the battery here. It's a 3000 milliamp battery. So you're going to get pretty much all day battery life. And aside from just having that, they have some other tricks that you can employ to really extend battery life even further. They've got stamina mode, which disables some background features. So if you're not using the phone, it's not going to use up as much power, as much energy. It also kicks in a low battery mode, so when you get down to like a critical state, it cuts out even more things to extend it and make sure your phone lasts all day. I routinely left the house around 7 a.m., used the phone frequently, and when I came home around 6 p.m., I still had battery life left over and it wasn't an issue. So it's not gonna crap out on you in the middle of your day, so that's not something that you need to worry about. Another novel idea is the way they handle multitasking. So in addition to being able to go to the multitasking window and close apps, you have these little small apps. These are basically the common utilities that you can have open at the same time. So I can have this floating window with my calculator and Chrome open at the same time. And then, like, let's say I see something on the web that I want to calculate, I can have this open, right? That's fine and dandy, but what's really interesting to me is that in addition to the pre-installed ones, you can download more from the Google Play Store, and you can create your own small apps, because pretty much anything that can be a widget, it can be a small app. So when you see it, I chose that. I have all these different options, so I can have Google Keep open at the same time as well while I do something else. So I'll name it Google Keep, and when I tap on it, I've got Keep open. So if I'm reading something and I want to take a note, and I say, hey everybody, this is Andrew, and I'm reading this thing and I'm taking a note with Google Keep at the same time. Once I stop talking, I've just created a note thanks to the little small app. So these are little things you can do to multitask, and they improve the overall experience of when you're using the Sony Xperia Z1S. The software is another love it or hate it area, because I'm personally in the camp of love. I like the way that Sony keeps things very simple with its icon choices. It's not as cartoony as what we see on LG and Samsung's devices. Some people might say it's a little more boring than what HTC does, but personally, my favorite of all the Android skins from a visual standpoint is definitely the Sony Xperia UI. And a big part of that is its media apps. I like the way that Sony organizes everything. When you go into the movies apps, it's very simple, very clean. They just have very nice details, and I like the way that they operate. Walkman is probably my favorite built-in music player. If you don't use Google Music or Beats or Spotify or Pandora or whatever, Walkman is pretty much the best looking of all of the default app options. Very simple. You play music, you browse through your library, and you can browse according to artists, songs, albums, or you can link with Play Music if you have that as your cloud-based solution. That's something that you can have with you. The last thing I want to show is the camera interface, because it's actually kind of good. Obviously, you've got this button right here to switch between the rear camera, which is 20.7 megapixels, and the front-facing camera. And you can turn flash on and off just by tapping on that button right there. But this is in the auto mode, which does a fairly good job of recognizing settings most of the time. As you can see, when I get close up, it knows that I'm in a macro mode, so it knows to switch to that. When I move away from that, it switches into like landscape and other situations. But if you really want to get personal with it, you can tap on that button and then change to a variety of things. Manual is going to give you complete control. You can change the way things act. Time burst is going to to take several photos and then takes one before and after you actually press the button. So if somebody moves once you press the shutter button, you've got that those two other photos as backups. Then you've got picture effect, which is pretty much a live view of different effects that you can apply. So rather than having to edit it retroactively, you can actually see while you're taking the photo, you know what, I like this partial color, this little black and white thing, and then I have a live view of it. Take a photo, boom, I'm done. But what's really going to interest people is this new feature called background defocus. This allows you to take a photo and take everything in the background out. So like it's not going to remove it, but it's going to blur it out, and you're really going to focus on the foreground. If you look at the example I post in this photo right here, this is just a standard photo where I focus on the foreground with the regular camera app, but you see, you can still see the people in the background, and it doesn't look that nice because it's a little sketchy, a little out of focus. With the camera defocus app, I can purposely take a photo. It's kind of like HDR for focusing. It blurs out the background and then blends the two photos together. So as you can see, the people in the background are still there. You can still see their shape, but there's less focus and detail on them, and you can focus more on the cup here. The problem with this is it doesn't work very well with moving subjects or moving background. So I did one example where I took a photo of someone and then a train came by in the background and that completely ruined it. So that didn't work. Same thing can happen with cars or anything. But overall, the camera here is pretty good, as you can tell from the photo samples included in here. And as always, be sure to click the link in the description below so you can see photo and video samples of how this camera performs. It's above average in terms of smartphones. The Xperia Z1S is another case where it just reminds me how much I wish Sony would make the US a priority. They keep making the right phone at the wrong time, because this is basically the same Xperia Z that we saw months ago with some improvements, and it's arriving at a time and we're already hearing stuff about a Z2, which could be displayed in February or March, right around the corner, and we can bet that phone probably won't be in the US either. And that's kind of the problem. Like, Sony is always on an off schedule with the rest of the US market. But if you're not on the bleeding edge of tech and you don't really care that Sony is going to take longer with software updates to begin with, so it won't be as bad, you can still enjoy this phone. Now, T-Mobile's network is fast, but it's not as prevalent. So you might be in an area with really great 4G coverage or really poor coverage in general. So pay attention to the service in your area. And if you can get reliable coverage from T-Mobile, the Xperia Z1S can be a reliable device, and it's going to be something that you're going to enjoy. It's got a good-ish display. You know, it's got some problems, but still good. It's got lots of power, lots of battery life, a good camera, and the design is simple, but most likely better than what you typically see. Now, if you can put up with the long wait times for the software, again, Sony has one of the least intrusive software UIs, and it has one of the better app packages. So if you can put up with that, I think that the Xperia Z1S is definitely something that you're going to enjoy owning. This is Andrew with MobileBurn.com and DailyMobile.net reviewing the Xperia Z1S. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy the video. And if so, feel free to click like and subscribe. Until next time.